Hello girls, I guess by now you're bored at home, but anyway, stay safe. To continue with the respiratory system, today we will start from breathing, which is a respiratory cycle. So when we talk about respiration and breathing, remember children, they are two different things. When we talk about respiration, we are talking about taking in of air, that is oxygen, and how it is utilized in the body. That is how the oxygen breaks down glucose to produce energy. But when we talk about breathing, we are just talking about a mechanical process of taking in, inhaling and exhaling, giving out air. So it is a muscular process only. So respiration includes breathing, but breathing doesn't include respiration. You may get this in, explain why. Now the respiratory cycle, children, is made up of inspiration, that is breathing in of air, and expiration, that is breathing out of air, and there is a very short respiratory pause in between. Now in normal adults, the breathing rate is about 12 to 18 breaths per minute. That is, in 1 minute an adult takes about 12 to 18 breaths, but a newborn breathes 60 times per minute. Okay, and if there is a slight increase in the carbon dioxide content in the blood, again the breathing rate increases because we need more oxygen. Okay, now inspiration or inhalation, that is taking in of air, it is the result of increase in the size of the thoracic cavity. That is, a chest cavity should increase, then more air will go inside, and this increase is due to the combined action of the ribs and the diaphragm. We learnt about the ribs in the skeletal system, if you remember. Now what happens when we breathe in? You can feel, keep your hands on your chest, and you'll see when you breathe in, the ribs move upwards and outwards due to the contraction of the external intercostal muscles, that is stretched between the ribs. Okay, so when the ribs moves upwards and outwards, what happens? The chest cavity increases, it enlarges. Okay, and the internal intercostal muscles are relaxed, the external intercostal muscles are contracted. Okay, so the diaphragm, it is a sheet of muscular tissue which separates the thoracic cavity from the abdomen, and you will find it on the base of the lungs, which remains arched upwards like a dome. So that contracts and flattens. That is, this is the diaphragm, it is like that. So here you have the ribs. Okay, ribs. So when you breathe in, this one become, this portion, it flattens. So when it becomes flat, again what happens? The area inside the chest cavity enlarges. Okay, so it contributes to the enlargement of the chest cavity lengthwards. So as the diaphragm flattens, it presses the organs also inside the abdomen. With the abdominal muscles relaxed, the muscles of the abdomen is relaxed, the abdominal wall moves outward. So when you breathe in, you will see that your abdomen moves outward, leading to increase in the volume of the chest cavity, and there is a decrease in pressure. When the volume increases, the pressure decreases. So when there is a decreased pressure inside the lungs, the air will move inside the lungs. It will be drawn inside the lungs. So the outside air, which is at a greater pressure, rushes in to equalize the pressure. Okay, so when the thoracic, that is the chest cavity, increases in size, volume increases, the pressure decreases. So as a result, the atmospheric pressure outside the body is more. So the lungs also expand, and the pressure inside the lungs also becomes less, that is below the atmospheric pressure, and the outside air is at a greater pressure. So it comes inside, it gushes inside to equalize the pressure. So that is how inhalation takes place. So here you can take a quick look in breathing in. You can see the ribs. This is the diaphragm. Okay, so the diaphragm contracts, it comes down. Okay, and there is an increase in the chest cavity. So the volume inside the chest cavity, inside the lungs, increases. So the pressure decreases, and atmospheric pressure is more. So air will move in through the nose. Okay, and just the opposite happens in expiration or exhalation. Okay, that is the reverse, opposite movement of the ribs and the diaphragm. The external intercostal muscles now relax. Okay, and the ribs move in automatically. So when you breathe out, you can see the diaphragm is relaxed and move upwards back to its dome-like shape. As a consequence, as a result, okay, the movements of the ribs and the diaphragm is opposite to what happened in inspiration. So the volume of the thoracic cavity is decreased. So volume becomes less. What happens to the pressure? Pressure will become more. So when the thoracic cavity, the volume of the thoracic cavity is decreased, the lungs also decrease. It compresses. So when it compresses, the air is forced out through the nose into the atmosphere. So when we breathe out forcibly, if you breathe out, like force your breath to go out, or naturally, when, like, especially when you are doing intense physical exercise, when you're running about, the internal intercostal muscles contract. Okay, which causes the contraction of the rib cage, and then the air is expelled out more for larger intake of oxygen, because when you're running about, you need more energy and you need more oxygen. So that is why you breathe very hard. Okay, now when we talk about tissue or internal respiration, we are talking about the process by which the cells of the body use oxygen to oxidize the food and release energy. Tissue or internal respiration, that is the respiration that takes place inside the cells or the tissues. Okay, and you know the carbon dioxide is the waste product, and it is thrown out from the body through the lungs. Okay, so we breathe out carbon dioxide rich air. Now, next is, how do we control the breathing movements? So the breathing movements are controlled by a respiratory center located in the medulla oblongata of the brain. So the brain is divided into different parts. The medulla oblongata, you will see it is just above the back part of the neck. Okay, so this center is stimulated by the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood. So if there is more carbon dioxide in the blood, faster will be the breathing. Now you know the breathing movement is not under our control, they are involuntary, but to some extent you can increase or decrease. You can take a deep breath in, you can take a deep breath out. Okay, and if you try to hold your breath, a stage will come when you will not be able to hold it any longer. Next, we move to the capacities of the lungs, which is also known as the respiratory volumes. The first is the tidal volume, that is air that is breathed in and out in a normal, quiet, which is not forced breathing. Total is 500 milliliter. So out of this 500 milliliter, we have dead air space, that is some tidal air is left in respiratory passages like trachea and bronchi, where there is no diffusion of gases. Okay, so that is about 150 milliliter. And then the air which reaches the air sacs where exchange of gases takes place, that is known as alveolar air. So it is the tidal air contained in the air sacs, that is 350 milliliters. Now, inspiratory reserve volume is the air that can be drawn in forcibly over and above the tidal air. That is, you breathe in normally and above that you take in more air. So that is also known as complemental air, that is about 3000 milliliter. Next is inspiratory capacity, that is the total volume of air a person can breathe in after a normal expiration. That is, you just give out air and then how much air you can take in, that is known as inspiratory capacity, that is about 3500 milliliters. Next is expiratory reserve volume, that is the air that can be forcibly expelled out after a normal expiration. That is, you just breathe out and again you breathe out over it. That is also known as supplemental air, that is about 1000 milliliters. Next is the vital capacity. That is the volume of air that can be taken in and expelled out by maximum inspiration and expiration. That is how much maximum amount of air that you can take in and the maximum amount of air that you can breathe out. That is vital capacity, that is about 4,500 milliliters. Next is the residual volume. Some air is always left in the lungs even after you breathe out almost all the air. Some air is always left behind. That is known as leftover or residual air. About 1,500 milliliters of air is always left behind in the lungs even after you force out all the air that is in the lungs. Then finally we have the total lung capacity. That is the maximum air which can at any time be held in the two lungs. How much of maximum air can be held in the two lungs? That is about 6,000 milliliters. Okay, so this is the graph form in which you can see the volumes of air exchange in the lungs. For your assignment this week, which you will submit day after tomorrow, you draw this diagram and write down the definitions of all the capacities of the lungs. Next, when we talk about inspired air and expired air. Now you know by now that the air inside the lungs is never replaced completely. Some amount of air is always left behind. So the air in the lungs is a mixture of the air left inside and the air that is taken in. In other words, the air in the lungs is becoming better or worse. When you take in air, the air inside the lungs is becoming better. When you breathe out, it becomes worse with each inspiration and expiration. So quality wise, the expired air differs from inspired air. First, it contains less oxygen, it contains more carbon dioxide, it contains more water vapor because we are giving that out, isn't it? And it is warmer or the same temperature as that of the body temperature, and it may contain some bacteria. Okay, now next we move on to the effect of altitude on breathing as you move upwards from the plains. Okay, so as we go higher up, the air we breathe in decreases in pressure because as you come up, the pressure also decreases. Okay, and when the pressure decreases, there is a decrease in oxygen content. Okay, so about 4,500 meters above sea level, sometimes people will suffer from air sickness, in which lack of oxygen, there is less amount of oxygen, it leads to dizziness, unsteady vision, loss of hearing, lack of muscular coordination, and even complete blackouts. Okay, now there are two terms or two types of you can say sicknesses that is related to deficiency of oxygen which reaches the lungs or the tissues. First is known as hypoxia. It is the deficiency of oxygen reaching the tissues. So it may result due to sitting for long hours in a crowded room with poor ventilation. Okay, and it may also be experienced at high altitudes where oxygen content of the air is low. So next is asphyxiation, is a condition in which the blood becomes more venous by accumulation of more carbon dioxide. So what happens? The blood in asphyxiation, the blood will have more carbon dioxide and less of oxygen because the oxygen supply is diminished. It becomes less. So this may result due to it is caused by several causes like strangulation, drowning, or any obstruction in the respiratory tract. By mistake, if something goes into the respiratory tract, asphyxiation takes place. So death will take place if the cause is not taken care of quickly. Artificial respiration is helpful in this type of. Some experiments on breathing and respiration. First is to demonstrate that water is lost during breathing. Very simple experiment. All you have to do is gently breathe on any cold surface like a piece of glass or slate. You will see the water droplets appearing on the surface. That proves the presence of moisture in expired air. So those of you who wear spectacles, you know, if you are to clean your spectacles, you breathe on it. Why? Because water vapor will condense on the glass and then you can clean it very easily, and you can even see the water vapor coming out from your mouth during the winters. Next is to demonstrate that carbon dioxide is given out during breathing, and the experimental setup is like this. There are two conical flasks A and B. Okay, there is a delivery tube coming from outside and dipping inside the conical flask A, and then there is another delivery tube moving out from the conical flask B, and there is a delivery tube with an opening at the center. Here you can see, which leads to the mouth, and it is connected between conical flask A and conical flask B. Okay, and there are two clips, clip C and clip D. So in the beginning, what we do is we close this clip so that air will not go inside conical flask B, and we breathe in, we pull in air from this opening. We pull in, so you will see bubbles rising here. The lime water in conical flask A does not turn milky. Now next is what we do is we open this clip and we close this clip here. Okay, hold on. We close this clip here, clip C we'll close here, and then we breathe out. Okay, that is, we will fill this delivery tube with air from our lungs. So the air will go through this delivery tube and you'll see bubbles in lime water in conical flask B. The lime water in conical flask B will turn milky, okay, faster. This will also turn milky, but it will take a long time because the content of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is less when you compare it to the content of carbon dioxide that is present in our lungs when we breathe out. So this lime water will turn milky faster than the lime water in conical flask A, proving that the carbon dioxide is present in the air that we breathe out. Experiment is to demonstrate the action of diaphragm during breathing. If you remember, we had set up this experiment during the science exhibition in school. Okay, so we take a bell jar, okay, and then we tie a rubber sheet at the bottom here. This is the rubber sheet here. So this rubber sheet is actually which represents the diaphragm. So when we pull this rubber sheet downwards, what is happening? The space inside the bell jar is becoming more. So air will rush in and the two balloons tied to these two ends will inflate. It will become big in size. That is how the air rushes into the lungs. And then again, when we push up the rubber sheet representing the diaphragm, which is in a dome shaped, okay, what will happen? The volume inside will become less and the air will rush out and you'll see the two balloons getting deflated. Okay, now next is to measure the volume of expired air. Very simple again. Okay, so you can see here there is a bottle, a delivery tube halfway, and another delivery tube which is dipping inside and then coming out, and then there is a container here. So fill your chest with air to the maximum and blow out through here, the short tube, expelling as much air as you can. Breathe out. So the water which comes out from here drops in from here and fills up this container. When you measure it, it will give you the volume of the air that is exhaled out. Now next is to show that oxygen is taken in by animals during respiration. So this is the setup here. You can see a small animal that we have used. It might be a cockroach here or a rat. So two conical flasks are taken, A and B. One is always the control, you know that. Okay, and in flask A, a live cockroach is there, and in flask B, a dead cockroach is there. Okay, and then of course the dead cockroach, you know, it is soaked in formalin so that it does not decay. otherwise bacterial action, and then again the bacteria will start respiring, and then we will not get the result. That is why flask B is the control experiment. So we fit a rubber cork in the mouth of each flask. You can see a rubber cork is there in each flask, and it must be airtight. So leave the flask for a few hours. After that, we will take a small burning candle into each flask. So a burning candle in each flask. Okay, we put it in. Immediately after putting the candle inside, we'll close the mouth of the flask tightly. So now we need to note the time taken for the candle flame to go out in A and B. So you will find out that the flame goes out faster in flask A, okay, and it goes out later in flask B. And the reason is that there was a live cockroach inside flask A. It was taking in oxygen, giving out carbon dioxide. So the amount of oxygen in flask A is very less when you compare it to flask B. So the candle will burn longer in the control experiment. Okay, so children, with this we come to the end of this chapter, that is the respiratory system. Okay, please go through table 14.4 and go through the comparison of respiration in plants and animals. We've already learned respiration in plants in a separate chapter in the beginning of this textbook, if you remember, and there are only slight differences. So please go through, and what next we'll be discussing in the WhatsApp group. Till then, children, stay safe. God bless you.